So let me turn this over now to Jim Buheim. Jim Buheim is Vice President of Communication for American Family Insurance. He's Director of Corporate Communications, including internal social media and audiovisual channels, and a long biography. Before he was with American Family, he was with CUNA Mutual. I have known Jim for a number of years. He does good work and works for a pretty amazing company, I think, in terms of the kinds of things they're doing. The first panel focused on this question of what are we doing now and how do we keep it going. You have Secretary Caleb Frostman, Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, Scott Rogers, who is the Workforce Director, Eau Claire Area's Chamber of Commerce, and Laura Catherman, President Waukesha Ozaukee, Washington Workforce Development Board.
This morning we spent a fair amount of time talking about some of the problems and issues that we're facing in the state, and a little bit about the actions that we can take to address those. I think this afternoon is much more about those actions, and that's where I'm going to focus my initial questions for this panel. And I start by asking each of you, you talked about many of the things that you're doing in the videos here. Of all those things that you're doing, what have produced, or what do you think is most likely to produce the best results in terms of matching workers and jobs and worker retention?
That's a really good question, and thanks for having us here today. This is a great group, good morning session. It's interesting, we have a lot of different programs that I think are really effective, and you saw it in the video, but the visual that I do think about is casting a wider net and a stronger net to get more folks in the workforce. But as far as the most effective programs for us, we are really bullish on programs like apprenticeship that allow for folks to earn, in most cases, a living wage while learning a really valuable, highly paid skill set. And so we are very proud to have implemented the first apprenticeship program in the country back in 1911. And in so many cases, we've done it first, we've done it best. And it's a big program for us as far as both addressing quantity of jobs as well as the quality. I'm so glad that so much discussion this morning was on wages and the value proposition. As we've traveled the state and talked to companies that are having success with attracting and retaining people, they've prioritized quality, pay, and benefits. So we think that apprenticeship's a great way to address both quantity and quality. And then as far as casting that wider net, I think someone else mentioned in the previous panel, but Wisconsin releases about 9,000 people from corrections every year, and so I don't think it's any surprise that we are seeing a ton of momentum behind really meaningful reentry programming. Whether we've delivered 2 new job centers in correctional facilities in the last year. We're going to deliver 4 in 2020. We've had mobile learning labs go to job centers for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, one of the greatest antidotes to recidivism is a quality living wage job so folks can be self-sustaining, and so we believe in that. And it's also just the right thing to do. I think we're grateful to have this unique inflection point where there's a really high sense of urgency to find every worker in the country or in the state possible. But these are things we should be doing no matter what the unemployment rate is, so we're excited to be putting this into process. And I'll save some time for those. But that's kind of what we're working on now that seems to be going well.
I think I would echo what Secretary Frostman said. The area perhaps I've seen the most progress in is the things we can do to create awareness and introduce the young people already growing up in Wisconsin to careers that are here. And I think having raised 3 children in our area, living there 17 years, them going to both high school and higher education, and the progress from when they're a little bit older and what's available to young people now. So the academic and career planning that's happening in the K-12 schools, the youth apprenticeship program in high schools, I think that could be expanded even further. We at the Eau Claire Chamber just became the consortium for our county, and there are additional career clusters that could be expanded there. And then our higher education, institutions of higher education, UW, in our area, the 3 UW schools in west central Wisconsin and the technical colleges, Chippewa Valley Technical College, have done a lot of things to create internships. Missy Hughes just talked about the new internship initiative to get more college students involved in internships in our communities so that they can stay here. I know specifically at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, a quarter of the students come from Minnesota. And so if we're going to import people to Wisconsin, one way would be to get them integrated into our community and to love our community, marry somebody there if we can, but if they get a job there and like working with an employer instead of getting an internship in Chicago or Minneapolis or somewhere, we have a better chance of hanging on to them. And I do want to mention, you said one thing, but we have worked really hard in Eau Claire, what can we do to attract people to our community, and Secretary Hughes mentioned that WEDC has the Talent Initiative programs. We got together with our local culture and entertainment publication and produced a video and website called Think Eau Claire that really plays on the research WEDC did and takes the things we have in our community and uses that for our employers to be able to attract people and talent to Eau Claire. So that's another thing that we think is valuable.
This is the danger in going last. I would agree with both of the Secretary and Scott's comments. We've seen a lot of great talent pipeline work. I think the Waukesha County Business Alliance, they've been mentioned earlier in the program. They do a lot of great work in the K-12 system, and most recently branching out into parents. We know it starts in the home, and so getting children educated sooner rather than later and getting teachers involved in teacher externships, we're really starting to see more momentum around those efforts. And so I think that'll really play out as they get older and start picking where they're going to continue their education. One thing that I touched on a little bit in the video that I want to expand upon is incumbent worker training. So we know that employers are really investing in their workforce that they have, and so oftentimes we're looking at a workforce that might be lower skilled as retirees are leaving with a lot of institutional knowledge, and so employers are investing in how can we train our incumbent workforce into new positions and open up opportunities for less educated or less skilled individuals to come into the front lines. And so we're seeing some great movement within companies, and the payoff has been that employers are able to retain those employees because they're really investing in the front lines. We know that's important to millennials and Gen Z, and quite frankly, it's really important to, I think, all workers to be invested in by their employer and to feel like it's a place that they can really call their home away from home.
If I can, I'm going to follow right up on that training piece, because I think it was you in the video who specifically talked about AI and innovation, automation. Do you have examples of organizations who have done, more specific training in those areas to try to get, all employees ready for the kind of digital refresh that's happening, right now, as well as those jobs that may be affected by AI and automation?
Yeah, I think there's a number of manufacturers that come to mind here in our 3-county region. A lot of times we've seen some reactive approaches rather than proactive, but that pendulum starting to switch into more proactive mode. Data analytics, AI, and automation is really driving training needs inside employers. We know it goes beyond manufacturing, but that's who I have the most experience working with. We're seeing that training being done mostly through partnering with institutions like Carroll University and our technical college system. Employers often can't do this alone or in-house, so we're having to bring in third-party experts. And so we're lucky that we have HERA in this region with this huge concentration of educational institutions to help, and that's where employers are seeing that great benefit.
Thank you. And then you heard from each of the 3 panelists here about things that we're doing in terms of matching workers and jobs, many involving what I'd call in-state efforts. Are there examples of efforts that you're seeing right now or that you're engaged in right now that are helping to attract that out-of-state worker and bring them into the state of Wisconsin?
Well, I know it's interesting having Secretary Hughes here this morning, something we talk about a lot. In my background, I was in economic development, and we focused a lot on workforce development, specifically on worker attraction and retention. This is not, as Jim mentioned and Dennis discussed, this is not really a new issue, but it's definitely pointed at this point in time. But when we ask folks, what is it that actually attracts people to a place and what keeps them there, I heard it this morning from Secretary Hughes, but it's the quality of life, economic infrastructure like broadband, like the quality of schools, like the water quality, like roads. And so, we've prioritized those type of investments across the administration, and we're hopeful that when folks look at relocating, as Secretary Hughes mentioned, that value proposition of why would you leave Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, we really want to provide that strong delta between our neighboring states and Wisconsin.
I realize I jumped ahead and you already answered this question, but I will mention that we were hearing from our employers that they could sell their culture at their place of business and talk about why someone would want to work for them, but this issue that has come up of people don't just look at the job, they look at the place. And because we have a lot of good things happening in Eau Claire, but we have a lot of good things happening everywhere, they came to us and said, what can we do? How can we need something to be able to do this. And so we listened to them, got some feedback, talked to WEDC to find out how they were marketing the state, and basically created a local effort called ThinkEauClaire.com, which is really a Chippewa Valley-centered effort to show what is life like there, what are the attributes that someone would be attracted to, and the attributes that we have. And we're even moving to the next stage as we're going to produce a follow-up to that to talk about why winter is so great in Wisconsin.
So certainly we have some large employers that have been able to attract students from other colleges out of the state and out of the area. But I think the challenge we have is we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in our 3 counties. And so when we look at solutions, I think it's really important that we look at how can we include all business sizes in these talent attraction efforts that go out of state. One thing that I am seeing, though, it's not necessarily out of state attraction, but attracting maybe a workforce that isn't participating. And so you might have a stay-at-home mom or a college student that can only work part-time. And so we're seeing employers really tailor their work schedules and work environments to attract those individuals to participate in the labor force. And so we're seeing some great traction around those efforts. And so that's one piece, but I think it's a piece that shouldn't be forgotten in the conversation.
And in your videos, I think each of you stressed the importance of collaboration. I mean, do you have additional thoughts or suggestions on what we could do to get even more energy out of public-private collaboration?
Yeah, as we have traveled the state, the areas that have done well in this have had really strong collaborations, and private employers are doing things as simple as donating equipment or donating time, but that collaborative piece between what I mentioned on the video, the workforce boards, the economic development corporations, K-12, tech college systems, it's so very important to having successful outcomes. We've seen that kind of across the state in urban areas, rural areas. Where that collaboration is there, it's been really, really successful.
I think the question about the common good came up earlier, and that also extends to all of us. In our institutions or organizations, we have to look at maybe checking our egos at the door, or something that's a little bit more difficult. I think some of the government leaders in Madison, I think the partisanship is still of great concern. It's not very well viewed from our part of the state. But we've had a lot of success in Eau Claire with having people get together and do things between education, government, and the private sector. Invite you to come up and see our Performing Arts Center that opened a year ago, and the difficult but worthwhile effort to put some of that together. I think there's some issues we need to move on to that were mentioned earlier: housing, transportation, childcare. Doing more to overcome barriers for people. So those are some things that we haven't made as much progress in, and we need to work on those.
I think all of the examples that we've talked about that have been successes in our region have come from collaborative efforts that have involved the private sector, public sector, workforce boards, education. Oftentimes, we're having someone from the public sector or a nonprofit be the facilitator and bringing private sector to the table. And the thing that I've seen change a lot in the last couple of years is the private sector being willing to engage and share, I won't say trade secrets, but share really, inside baseball, how are they attracting their employees, hoping that their colleagues and other companies can benefit from that. And so I think the more employers are getting together around specific sectors or occupations, the public sector and nonprofits can really help them facilitate how do we create scalable approaches that we can benefit all small and medium-sized companies with.